The Deep Space Monitoring Station picked up the signal at exactly 3:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Dr. Amanda Wells had been drinking her fifth cup of coffee when the computers started screaming with alerts. The massive dish arrays outside were all pointing toward the same spot in space, and what they found there made her blood run cold. 1,000 ships hung in the darkness beyond Neptune, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. The vessels moved with purpose, their hulls gleaming with technology that made Earth's most advanced spacecraft look like stone tools. Amanda's hands shook as she enhanced the image, watching the alien fleet arrange itself into attack formations. The transmission came through on every frequency at once. The voice was cold, mechanical, and spoke in perfect English through some kind of universal translator. Primitive species of the third planet, you have been selected for integration into the hegemony empire. Surrender now and become our servants, or face complete extinction. You have 72 hours to decide. Amanda ran from the control room, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. She had to warn everyone, had to tell the world that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The news would change everything, but first they had to survive long enough to matter. Within 6 hours, every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth was broadcasting the same message. The alien fleet had made itself visible to every telescope on the planet, hanging in space like a terrible promise. World leaders canceled their meetings, armies were placed on high alert. And for the first time in human history, every nation on Earth forgot their differences. President Martinez addressed the world from the White House, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. My fellow humans, we face something that no generation before us has ever encountered. An enemy from the stars has come to our home, and they expect us to surrender without a fight. They have forgotten something important. About our species, we do not surrender, we do not bow down, we fight. The Global Defense Initiative had been a small organization before the aliens arrived. Dr. Wells found herself promoted from a simple astronomer to the head of humanity's space defense program. She stood in the newly constructed command center, watching screens that showed every satellite, every space station, and every piece of orbital debris around Earth. They think we are primitive, she told her team of engineers and scientists. They looked at our chemical rockets and decided we were no threat. They have made a mistake that will cost them dearly. And the next 72 hours changed everything. Every factory on Earth stopped making consumer goods and started making weapons. Every nuclear submarine was loaded with missiles and moved into position. The International Space Station was evacuated and turned into a weapons platform, its solar panels replaced with kinetic bombardment systems. Scientists worked around the clock to understand the alien technology. They studied the electromagnetic signatures from the ships, analyzed their formation patterns, and tried to guess their capabilities. What they discovered was both terrifying and hopeful. The aliens were advanced, but they were also predictable. They followed standard military doctrine, the kind taught in war colleges across the galaxy. The problem was that humans had never been to war college. They had learned to fight in the mud, in the trenches, in the streets and alleys of 1,000 different conflicts. While other species had evolved past warfare, humans had been shaped by it. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every moment of genius had come from the pressure of competition and conflict. Dr. Wells stood on the observation deck, looking up at the stars through the reinforced glass. Somewhere out there, the alien fleet was waiting for humanity's answer. She thought about her daughter, sleeping safely in her bed, unaware that the world had changed forever. She thought about every human who had ever lived, every struggle they had faced, every victory they had earned. The aliens had called them primitive, but they had missed something crucial. Humans were not primitive because they lacked technology. They were primitive because they had never forgotten how to survive. While other species had grown soft in their advanced civilizations, humans had remained sharp, ready for the next challenge. The Global Defense Initiative sent their response to the alien fleet exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum. It was not a surrender. It was not a plea for mercy. It was a simple message that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. This is Earth. We reject your demands. We will not serve. We will not bow. If you want our world, you will have to take it from us. But know this, we have been preparing for this fight our entire existence. We are not the sheep you think we are. We are wolves, and you have just entered our territory. The alien fleet began its approach to Earth, confident in their superior technology and overwhelming numbers. They had conquered dozens of worlds with minimal resistance, and they expected the same easy victory here. The humans were primitives, after all, barely capable of leaving their own planet. They had no idea that they were about to wake a sleeping giant. The first shots of the war were fired when the lead alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere. They came expecting to find panicked primitives running in terror. Instead, they found a planet that had turned itself into a fortress. With every man, woman, and child ready to fight for their survival, the aliens had superior technology, but humans had something more valuable. They had spent their entire evolutionary history learning one simple lesson: never give up, never surrender, and never let anyone take what is yours without a fight. The war for Earth was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The hegemony ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their shields glowing bright blue against the morning sky. Commander Vorth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive planet grow larger on his screens. This would be the easiest conquest in hegemony history, he thought. The humans had no space fleet, no energy weapons, no defensive systems worth mentioning. His confidence lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The first surprise came from orbit. The International Space Station, which their sensors had dismissed as a research facility, suddenly lit up with weapon signatures. Kinetic bombardment rounds screamed down from space, each one a simple piece of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. The lead hegemony ship never saw it coming. The explosion was visible from the ground. Captain Rex Turner watched through the reinforced windows of his command center as the alien vessel broke apart in a ball of fire and debris. "Well, that got their attention," he muttered, then grabbed his radio. "All units, this is command. The party has started. Execute Operation Hammer." Around the world, humanity's desperate plan went into action. Every satellite in orbit suddenly became a weapon. Communication satellites fired their last bursts of fuel to ram into alien ships. Weather satellites detonated their power cells. Like bombs, even the oldest pieces of space junk were guided into collision courses with the enemy fleet. The hegemony ships responded with their own weapons, beams of energy that could slice through starship hulls. But they were aiming at moving targets that fought back like nothing they had ever seen. Earth's defenders did not retreat when hit. They did not surrender when overwhelmed. They kept fighting until their ships were nothing but floating scrap metal. Rex Turner climbed into his modified fighter, a civilian spacecraft that had been hastily fitted with nuclear warheads. The plan was simple and insane in equal measure. Get close to the alien ships, deliver the payload, and hope the explosion was big enough to matter. He was not the only one with this idea. Across the world, pilots were taking off in everything that could fly. Crop dusters carried chemical weapons. Passenger jets had been loaded with explosives. Even small private planes were being used as guided missiles. The aliens had expected an organized military response, but this was something else entirely. The first wave of human attackers hit the hegemony formation like a swarm of angry bees. Each ship was small and weak compared to the alien vessels, but there were thousands of them, and they all had the same deadly purpose. The nuclear explosions lit up the sky like tiny suns, each one taking out sections of the enemy fleet. "Commander." Vorth watched his formation fall apart in disbelief. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "These are primitives. They should be cowering in their shelters." "Sir, they are using suicide attacks," the officer replied, his voice shaking. "Every ship that approaches us is loaded with explosives. They are not trying to survive, they are trying to kill us." The truth was becoming clear to the hegemony fleet. The humans were not fighting a conventional war. They were fighting like cornered animals, using every trick and desperate measure they could think of. When their missiles ran out, they used their ships as missiles. When their ships were destroyed, they used the debris as weapons. From the surface of Earth, millions of people watched the battle unfold in the sky above. They saw their defenders fighting against impossible odds, trading their lives for every small victory. The sight filled them with something the aliens could not understand: pride, defiance, the absolute refusal to give up. The nuclear submarines were the next surprise. The hegemony ships had focused their attention on the space battle, not expecting any threat from Earth's oceans. When the first submarine-launched ballistic missile broke the surface, its nuclear warhead aimed at the nearest alien vessel, the enemy finally understood what they were facing. These humans had weapons that could destroy entire cities, and they were willing to use them. The missile struck its target dead center, vaporizing the alien ship in a flash of atomic fire. Around the world, dozens of submarines launched their own attacks, turning the sky into a deadly light show, but the aliens were not helpless. Their energy weapons began systematically destroying every military installation on Earth. Cities burned under their assault. Millions of people fled from the major population centers, but many chose to stay and fight. They used hunting rifles against starships, threw rocks at energy shields, and fought with whatever weapons they could find. The battle raged for 18 hours. When it was over, half of the hegemony fleet was destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The cost to humanity was enormous. Most of their major cities lay in ruins, their space defenses were gone, and millions of people were dead or missing, but something incredible had happened. The aliens had not won. They had expected to conquer Earth in a matter of hours, but instead they had been forced to retreat to a safe distance to lick their wounds. The primitive humans had given them a bloody nose, and the entire galaxy would hear about it. Commander Vorth sent his report to Hegemony Command with shaking hands. "The humans are not what we expected," he wrote. "They fight with a savagery that defies comprehension. They use weapons we have never seen, tactics we have never encountered. They do not surrender, they do not retreat, and they do not fear death. Recommend immediate reinforcement of all invasion forces." The reply came back within hours. "You are fighting primitives with chemical rockets. How can you possibly need reinforcements?" But Vorth knew the truth. The humans were primitive, but they were also something else. They were warriors who had been shaped by millions of years of conflict. Survivors who had learned to adapt and overcome every challenge their world could throw at them. They were not advanced, but they were dangerous. The first battle for Earth was over, but the war was just beginning. The aliens had learned that humanity would not surrender easily, and the humans had learned that they could hurt their enemies. Both sides began preparing for the next round. Knowing that the stakes could not be higher, the sleeping giant had been awakened, and it was angry. The subway tunnels beneath London had become a weapons factory. Dr. Tom Bradley worked by the light of salvaged alien power cells, his hands covered in grease and burns as he connected human electronics to captured hegemony technology. The crashed alien fighter above them had provided more advanced components than Earth's entire space program had ever produced. "The circuit is compatible," he announced to his team of engineers and former college students. "Their power systems can run our computers, and our computers can control their weapons. We are about to level the playing field." 3 months had passed since the failed invasion. The hegemony occupied every major city on Earth, but they controlled nothing beyond their fortified positions. Humanity had not surrendered. Instead, they had gone underground, literally and figuratively. Every sewer, every basement, every natural cave had become a base of operations for the resistance. The aliens had expected gratitude from the surviving humans. They had expected the primitives to accept their new place as servants and slaves. Instead, they found themselves fighting a war against an entire planet. There were no civilians in this conflict, no innocent bystanders. Every human was a potential enemy, and every human was fighting back. Maria Santos crouched in the ruins of Mexico City, watching a hegemony patrol through her rifle scope. The aliens were careful, professional, following their standard security protocols. They had no idea that she had been studying their movements for weeks, learning their patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The resistance had learned to think like hunters. They studied their prey, learned their weaknesses, and struck without warning. The aliens had superior technology, but they were predictable. They followed the same routes, used the same tactics, made the same mistakes over and over again. The shot echoed through the empty streets. The alien commander fell, his advanced armor no match for a simple human bullet fired from close range. Before his squad could react, more shots rang out from a dozen different positions. The humans had learned to coordinate their attacks to strike from multiple angles at once. "Target down," Maria whispered into her radio. "Package secured." The package was another piece of alien technology, another opportunity to learn and adapt. The resistance had become experts at reverse engineering, taking apart every piece of hegemony equipment they could capture. They were learning faster than the aliens could adapt to their new tactics. In the tunnels beneath Tokyo, former electronics engineer David Kim was making a discovery that would change everything. The alien communication system was more advanced than anything humans had ever built, but it was also unencrypted. The hegemony had never faced an enemy capable of hacking their networks. "I am inside their system," he announced to his team. "I can see their troop movements, their supply schedules, even their personal messages. They have no idea we are listening." The information was gold. The resistance learned about planned attacks hours before they happened. They knew which convoys were carrying valuable supplies, which positions were weakly defended, which commanders were making mistakes. For the first time since the invasion, humans had an advantage, but the real breakthrough came when David accessed the hegemony database and found something that changed everything. Earth was not the only world under attack. The aliens had been conquering planets across the galaxy, enslaving entire civilizations. The galaxy was full of advanced species, but they had all fallen to the same enemy. "We are not alone," David told the other resistance leaders during their encrypted video conference. "There are others out there, other species that have been conquered. Some of them are still fighting, but they are losing. The hegemony is not just our enemy, they are everyone's enemy." The discovery changed the entire nature of the conflict. This was not just a war for Earth, it was a war for the entire galaxy. The humans were not just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for everyone who had ever been conquered by the hegemony. General Lisa Chun stood in the command center that had been carved out of a mountain in Colorado. The resistance had grown into a proper military force, with units operating on every continent. They had learned to make their own weapons, to manufacture their own supplies, to coordinate attacks across the entire planet. "The aliens think they are fighting primitives," she told her staff. "They have made the same mistake that every conqueror in human history has made. They think that technology makes them superior, that advanced weapons make them invincible. They have forgotten the most important lesson of warfare." She pointed to a map of the world, covered in red markers showing resistance activities. "It does not matter how advanced your weapons are if you cannot hit your target. It does not matter how strong your armor is if your enemy knows where you are weak. The hegemony has better technology, but we have something they do not understand." "What is that?" asked her aide. "We have been at war with each other for our entire existence. We have learned every trick, every strategy, every desperate measure that can be used to defeat a superior enemy. While they were developing their technology, we were developing our ability to survive." The resistance had learned to use the alien technology against them. Captured energy weapons were reverse engineered and mass-produced. Alien vehicles were reprogrammed to serve human operators. Even their communication systems were turned into weapons, broadcasting false information and propaganda to confuse the enemy. The hegemony garrison commanders were sending increasingly desperate reports to their superiors. "The humans are not behaving like conquered people," wrote Commander Vorth. They attack our patrols, sabotage our equipment, and refuse to cooperate with our occupation forces. Every day our casualties increase, and we are no closer to pacifying this planet, but the Resistance was planning something bigger. Dr. Bradley had finished his most important project, a device that could hack into any hegemony system from a distance. With it, they could take control of alien ships, disable their weapons, and turn their own technology against them. "It is ready," he announced. "We can take control of their fleet, but we need to get close enough to use it. That means someone has to get aboard one of their ships." The mission was suicide, everyone knew it. But volunteers lined up anyway, because that was what humans did when faced with impossible odds. They did not calculate the probability of success. They did not worry about the risks. They just did what needed to be done. The war was about to enter a new phase. The aliens had awakened something in humanity that they did not understand, something that had been sleeping for too long. The primitive species they had tried to conquer was about to show them what it meant to fight a race that had never learned to surrender. The Resistance was ready to strike back, and the galaxy would never be the same. The stolen hegemony transport ship drifted through space, its hull scarred from the battle that had claimed its original crew. Lieutenant Alex Rivera sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on controls that had been designed for alien fingers. Behind him, 23 other humans prepared for what might be the most important mission in their species' history. 2 minutes to target, Alex announced. Through the view screen, the massive hegemony command ship grew larger, its hull bristling with weapons and sensors. Getting close enough to use Dr. Bradley's hacking device would require flying directly into the enemy's most heavily defended position. General Chun's voice crackled through the stolen communicator. "Remember, you only need to hold the device active for 30 seconds. That should be enough time to download their entire database and take control of their fleet communications." The mission was the result of 2 years of planning and preparation. The Resistance had learned everything they could about hegemony technology, tactics, and weaknesses. They knew the aliens were overconfident, predictable, and completely unprepared for the kind of desperate attack humans were capable of. Alex thought about his sister, killed in the first wave of the invasion. He thought about the millions of humans who had died fighting an enemy that considered them nothing more than primitive animals. Most of all, he thought about the other species mentioned in the captured databases, civilizations that had been conquered and enslaved by the same enemy. 1 minute to target, he called out. "Everyone ready?" The answer came back as a chorus of affirmatives. These were not professional soldiers, they were engineers, teachers, mechanics, and farmers who had learned to fight because they had no choice. They were humanity at its most desperate and most dangerous. The first challenge was getting past the outer defenses. The hegemony sensors were sophisticated, but they were looking for human ships, not their own stolen technology. Alex flew the transport exactly like a returning patrol, following the proper flight patterns and broadcasting the correct identification codes. Transport 774 requesting docking permission. He said into the communicator, trying to sound like the alien commander whose voice patterns he had studied for weeks. "Permission granted," came the reply. "Dock at Bay 12. Alex smiled grimly. The aliens had made their first mistake. They trusted their own technology too much, and they had never considered that humans might be capable of stealing and using it against them. The transport settled into the docking bay with a soft thump. Through the view screen, Alex could see hegemony soldiers waiting to greet what they thought was a returning patrol. They had no idea that they were about to face an enemy that had been planning this moment for months. "Now," Alex whispered. The transport's cargo bay opened, and 24 humans emerged with weapons blazing. They moved with the desperate precision of people who knew they were probably going to die, but were determined to make it count. Every shot was aimed, every movement was calculated. Every second was precious. The hegemony soldiers were caught completely off guard. They had expected a routine docking procedure, not a full-scale assault inside their most secure facility. Their advanced armor and energy weapons were useless against an enemy that was too close. Too fast and too determined to stop. Dr. Bradley's hacking device was small, about the size of a laptop computer, but it represented years of human ingenuity and desperate innovation. Sarah Walsh carried it through the corridors of the alien ship, following the blueprints they had stolen from other captured vessels. "I need to get to the main computer core," she told Alex through her headset. "That is where I can access their entire network." The fighting was intense. The humans had surprise on their side, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Every meter of progress cost them dearly, but they kept moving forward. They had trained for this, prepared for this, and they were not going to let anything stop them. The main computer core was a massive chamber filled with alien technology that hummed with power. Sarah connected the hacking device to the central processing unit, watching as Dr. Bradley's virus began to spread through the hegemony network. "It is working," she reported. "I am downloading their database now. Ship locations, troop movements, supply routes, everything. But the real prize was what they found in the deeper files. The hegemony had been keeping detailed records of every species they had conquered, every world they had enslaved. The database contained the locations of prison planets, the names of resistance leaders, and most importantly, the current status of other species still fighting the occupation. "There are others," Sarah breathed, reading the data streaming across her screen. "Entire civilizations that are still resisting. They are scattered, disorganized, but they are still fighting." The discovery changed everything. Humanity was not alone in their struggle. Across the galaxy, other species were fighting the same enemy, facing the same impossible odds. They just did not know about each other. "Upload complete," Sarah announced. "I have everything." But the hegemony had finally realized what was happening. Alarm sirens echoed through the corridors and reinforcements were pouring into the ship. The humans had accomplished their mission, but getting out alive was going to be the real challenge. Alex and his team fought their way back to the transport, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. They had learned to fight like humans, using every dirty trick and desperate measure their species had ever developed. They used the ship's own systems against it, turning the lights off and the gravity generators down to create chaos. The transport lifted off just as the hegemony security forces reached the docking bay. Energy beams lit up the space around them, but Alex was already pushing the stolen ship to its limits. They had what they came for, and now they had to get it back to Earth. The flight home was a running battle. Hegemony fighters chased them through the outer system, but the humans had learned to fly their ships like they were extensions of their own bodies. They twisted and turned through asteroid fields, used debris as cover, and fought with the desperate skill of people who had nothing left to lose. "We made it," Alex announced as Earth appeared on their screens. "Mission complete." But completing the mission was only the beginning. The data they had stolen would change the war completely. For the first time, humanity had a complete picture of the galactic situation. They knew where their enemies were, where their allies were, and most importantly, what they needed to do to win. General Chun stood in the command center, reading the reports from the successful mission. The information was overwhelming, but it was also hopeful. Humanity was not facing this enemy alone. They had allies, even if those allies did not know they existed yet. "Send a message to every resistance cell on Earth," she ordered. "Tell them that we are not just fighting for our own world anymore. We are fighting for the entire galaxy. The hegemony has made a mistake they will never recover from." "What mistake is that?" asked her aide. "They woke up humanity," Chun replied. "And now we know that we are not the only ones who need to be free." The war was about to expand beyond Earth. The sleeping giant had not only awakened, it had learned that it was not alone. The galaxy was full of other sleeping giants, and humanity was about to wake them all up. The liberation of Kepler Station began at dawn, though dawn had no meaning in the eternal darkness of space. Admiral David Brooks stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Indomitable, watching as his fleet of hybrid ships prepared for the largest battle in human history. These vessels were the children of desperation and innovation, combining human engineering with captured alien technology to create something the galaxy had never seen. "All ships report ready," announced Commander Emma Stone from her position at the tactical station. "The hegemony garrison has no idea we are coming." The plan was audacious even by human standards. Kepler Station was the most important trade hub in the galaxy, a massive space station that controlled shipping routes to hundreds of worlds. More importantly, it was where the hegemony kept their most valuable prisoners, the leaders and scientists of conquered civilizations. Dr. Maya Patel had spent months designing the ships that would make this mission possible. Each vessel was a masterpiece of adaptation, taking the best features of human and alien technology and combining them into something greater than the sum of its parts. They were faster than anything the hegemony had ever built, more maneuverable than their own fighters, and armed with weapons that could punch through any defense. "Remember," Admiral Brooks announced to his fleet, "we are not just fighting for Earth anymore. We are fighting for everyone who has ever been conquered by these aliens. Today we show the galaxy that the age of hegemony rule is over." The first wave of human ships emerged from hyperspace directly above Kepler Station. The hegemony defenders were caught completely off guard, expecting nothing more than routine patrol ships. Instead, they faced a fleet of vessels that moved like living things, striking with precision and retreating before their enemies could respond. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that left their enemies reeling. They used their ships like weapons, ramming enemy vessels when their ammunition ran low. They turned their own damaged ships into guided missiles aimed at the most critical targets. But the real surprise came when the human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, sending messages in dozens of different languages to the prisoners held inside the station. "This is the Human Liberation Fleet," the message said. "We are here to free you. Prepare for extraction." The prisoners could not believe what they were hearing. The humans, the species that had been dismissed as primitive and backward, had somehow built a fleet capable of challenging the hegemony. They had come not just to rescue their own people, but to liberate everyone who had been enslaved. Among the prisoners was Dr. Oren of the Etherian Republic, a brilliant scientist who had been captured during the fall of his homeworld. He had spent 3 years in hegemony custody, watching as his people were scattered across the galaxy as slaves and servants. Now, incredibly, salvation was coming from the least likely source. "How is this possible?" he asked the human soldier, who burst through the door of his cell. "Your species barely had spaceflight when we were conquered." The soldier, a young woman named Lieutenant Lisa Park, smiled grimly. "We learn fast when we are angry, and we are very angry." The liberation of Kepler Station was a masterpiece of human coordination. While the fleet battled the hegemony defenders, in space, special forces teams moved through the station itself, freeing prisoners and capturing critical intelligence. They moved with the precision of a military operation and the desperation of people who knew they might never get another chance. The hegemony garrison fought back with everything they had, but they were facing an enemy that had learned to adapt to any situation. When the humans ran out of ammunition, they used captured alien weapons. When their ships were damaged, they used them as battering rams. When their forces were outnumbered, they used the station's own systems against the defenders. The turning point came when the liberated prisoners began to fight alongside their rescuers. Scientists became soldiers, engineers became saboteurs, and civilians became warriors. The hegemony had never faced anything like it, an entire population rising up in coordinated rebellion. "The station is ours," Commander Stone reported to Admiral Brooks. "All prisoners have been evacuated, and we have captured their entire database. The intelligence value alone makes this mission worth the cost." But the real victory was what happened next. The freed prisoners did not just want to go home, they wanted to fight. They had seen what humans were capable of, and they wanted to be part of the liberation effort. For the first time in galactic history, different species were working together. Not just for trade or diplomacy, but for war, the news of the liberation spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On 100 different worlds, resistance movements that had been scattered and demoralized suddenly had new hope. The humans had proven that the hegemony could be defeated, that their technology was not invincible, that their empire could be brought down. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. They launched a massive counterattack, sending their most powerful fleet to destroy the human vessels and retake the station. But they were too late. The humans had already accomplished their mission, and they were ready for the counterattack. The Battle of Kepler Station became the turning point of the war. The hegemony fleet was massive, with ships that dwarfed anything the humans had ever built. But the human fleet was not fighting alone anymore. They had allies, species that had been conquered and enslaved but had never forgotten how to fight. The battle raged for hours, with ships from dozens of different species working together under human leadership. The humans provided the strategy and the determination, while their allies provided knowledge of hegemony tactics and weaknesses. Together they were unstoppable. When the smoke cleared, the hegemony fleet was in ruins. Their most powerful ships were destroyed, their best commanders were dead, and their reputation for invincibility was shattered. The news spread across the galaxy in hours, carried by the communication networks that the humans had learned to hack and control. Resistance movements on 100 worlds suddenly found themselves with new weapons, new intelligence, and new hope. The humans had not just won a battle, they had started a revolution. The age of hegemony rule was ending, and a new age of freedom was beginning. Ambassador Robert Kim stood before the reformed Galactic Coalition, representing not just Earth, but all the species that had been liberated from hegemony rule. The chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy, all united by their shared experience of oppression and their common desire for freedom. The hegemony called us primitive, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. They looked at our simple technology and decided we were no threat. They made the same mistake that conquerors have always made throughout history. They confused advancement with strength, technology with power. He paused, looking around at the faces of beings who had traveled across the galaxy to be here. But they forgot something important. We did not evolve in paradise. We evolved in hell. For millions of years we fought for every scrap of food, every drop of water, every breath of air. We learned to survive because we had no choice. We learned to fight because the alternative was death. The chamber was silent, hanging on every word. The hegemony has surrendered, but our work is not done. There are still worlds to liberate, still people to free, still wrongs to be made right. We offer ourselves not as conquerors, but as guardians. We will stand watch while you rebuild your civilizations, your cultures, your dreams. He smiled, and it was the smile of a species that had looked into the abyss and refused to blink. The sleeping giant has awakened, and it will never sleep again. Anyone who threatens the peace we have built together will have to deal with us. And we are very good at dealing with threats. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was no longer the primitive species that could be ignored or conquered. They were the guardians of freedom, the protectors of the innocent, the ones who would wake up whenever the darkness tried to return.